Today on the podcast, some fan service from an author, 2 books for the price of 1, and of course, the weekly reveal to what magical book I have pulled down from my to-be-read shelf. All of that and more this week on A Novel Review. Hello and welcome to the literature podcast, A Novel Review. My name is Seamus, your host, and together we will discuss, dissect, and explore the wonderful world of literature. And the wonderful world of literature is a vast and dense jungle. So let's start making our way through, one book at a time. Hey everyone, welcome back. Seamus here. I'm the host of A Novel Review. I'm the only person here. And today we have a nice little lineup of books on my desk here to go through. Only one I'll be talking about really in depth. But yeah, before we get to that book, I always take a moment to reflect on any mantelpiece moments, something to highlight from the week past. And this week I stupidly went to a bookshop on my lunch break, and that's stupid because I always end up buying something. And I came across this little book, which is Gilden-Fire by Stephan Donaldson. Now, if you've been paying any attention to the pod, you'd know that I'm reading a trilogy of books this year, the Thomas Covenant Chronicles, Thomas Covenant, The Unbeliever, and I just finished this book, The Ill-Earth War, which I spoke about briefly in another podcast, and so I was just in this bookshop perusing the shelves, and I saw Stephan Donaldson's name on this little spine, and I thought, you know what, I'm quite enjoying him as a writer. I quite like his writing style. It's quite interesting. And, you know, it's a relatively thin book. I'll pull it out and take a look because if it's something else, if it's a little novella, which it evidently is, I wouldn't mind just having a poke of what else he's produced. And so I pulled it out completely by chance. And it's actually, and this is why I said it's a sort of a fan service, it's a snippet. So in this particular book, The Ill-Earth War, they constantly reference a few different things that have happened sort of off screen, and you don't really get any more information into them. And this is one of those moments. And it was completely sort of, he speaks about, there's a little opening chapter at the start of the book, and he speaks about how the editors were like, you've written too much, we need to cut this down. And so this was one of the stories that he cut out of this particular book, which is just, I think, quite fascinating because it was completely by chance that I stumbled across this. And it's a wonderful little short story. What do we got here? 94 pages, I believe, 92 pages. And the reason I say it's a fan service is because he's quite honest at the start of this book in that he says it actually is completely useless to someone that hasn't read the first 2 books, but this book in particular, The Ill-Earth War. This book will not be attracting any new fans and will not serve any new fans any purpose because it would make completely no sense. So it's really just a deleted scene from this book, which is, I think, fantastic because I've never actually heard of an author doing this before where they just release a story that is completely nonsensical to a new reader. Obviously, they'd want to try write it in a way that could attract new fans, which he didn't do. He was like, no, bugger this. This is for the fans. This is for the real fans. So I'm really excited by that. I cannot wait to sort of jump into it. It's come at quite an annoying time because I've got to jump into the 3rd book of this. I'm currently reading another big book there. I got another big book to jump into after that, but I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. So yeah. Okay, 2 books for the price of 1. Today we have 2 novellas by the author Nora Gold. This book was sent to me by my friend in Canada who's in the publishing industry, who notoriously has great taste in books. And yeah, she sent me an email saying, I've got something a little different for you today, 2 novellas in one. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah. You know, she sent me sort of specs for both books and I read them and they looked really good. So she sent them and it's come in, it arrived in 1 copy, which I kind of love. Like you flip it in sickness and in health, and then you flip it and you got Yom Kippur in a gym. And I really love that. I really think that's kind of fun. And I think more authors should probably do that because, and I don't know this, but I imagine a lot of novellas actually remain sort of on the cutting room floor. They don't actually get published because I imagine financially novellas wouldn't do as well as like a full 350 page book because more people are more likely to want to pay for a book. That's just kind of my off-the-cuff thoughts. I could be completely wrong in that. some things about the book that I sort of didn't consider until after I'd read, and then I kind of like realized and was like, oh no, I quite enjoyed that fact. One thing, in fact, it's really only one thing that I noticed between the two books, is that they're two very different stories, both sort of narratively, but tonally as well. I mean, you can sort of see Nora's general writing style, her I guess her comfortable writing style, just her writing style in general. But I think what I loved is that they're very, very different in terms of tone, because Yom Kippur in a Gym is actually quite a funny story with some glimmers of, not say darkness in them, but there are some darker moments in the story. Whereas In Sickness and in Health is actually, I'd say, quite a serious story, and it's still got a little bit of that sort of Nora Gold humor, I'm going to call it, but it's still, well, it's just it's completely different. There's no humor sort of leading up to it. There's sort of, yeah, I mean, there's a tiny bit of humor, but it's not the same kind of humor that appears in Yom Kippur in a Gym. So I think we need to start talking specifically about the books themselves. Okay, let's crack on. Yom Kippur in a Gym. I don't know much about Yom Kippur itself specifically. All I know is it's kind of known as the holiest day of the year for Judaism. So that was really all I knew sort of going into this book, what Yom Kippur was. And that's, I mean, it doesn't really educate you on what Yom Kippur is. It's got a few sentences. Not that it was trying to educate you on that. But it's kind of got this sense that it's kind of this day where you ask forgiveness and you sort of plan for the next year of your life. You sort of, reflect on the year you've had and plan for the year you're hopefully going to have. And you kind of read the title and it's Yom Kippur in a Gym. You kind of think, what's that all about? Yom Kippur in a Gym. That sounds a bit odd, interesting, odd, same thing often. And then you start reading and you very quickly understand the humor, because you're sort of entering this gym and everyone's in suits and dresses and dressed up really nicely. And it's this really big ordeal, really big occasion. Like I said, the holiest day in Judaism. And then it's held in a gym. And I think that's kind of the wonderful humor that sort of carries through this book, is that it's the biggest day for Jewish people. It's the holiest day of the year. And it's taking place in a gym. And it's a school gym at that. And I mean, my school gym was all right, but I would not be having, I mean, I'm not religious, but I wouldn't envision having my wedding there or celebrating some holy day like that. So that's kind of the wonderful humor of it that I really did enjoy. And there's this other piece of humor. I'm just going to read one little quote that sort of, I think, really sets you up for the writing style and the humor that is sort of carried throughout this book. Now, I should actually give a brief background before I read this quote, because the book is told through 5 different viewpoints, 5 different people's viewpoints. So it's told in first person through these 5 individuals, and each chapter is a different individual, and it's their experience through this kind of, it seems to be about hour and a half of Yom Kippur, and they've been fasting all day and everyone's hungry, everyone's tired, everyone's kind of thirsty, but it's a big religious ceremony, so everyone's trying to take it kind of seriously and be respectful. So this is one character, her name is Rachel, and she has made this, what sounds to be delicious honey cake, and she spends a lot of the book stressing about whether she's made enough honey cake or whether she needs to cut up the slices into smaller slices so that she can sort of feed the masses. And this is the funny little quote. It reads, "She is always hungry. There is a disease called Prader-Willi syndrome where the sick person is always hungry. Rachel does not have this disease, but she is always hungry and thinking about food." And I just kind of loved that just little line of like, let's take something really serious. There's this very real Prader-Willi syndrome that people probably genuinely suffer from. And let's just liken that to this person that's actually just starving and just loves food, because, I love food and often it makes you feel very dramatic. I mean, hangry is a very real thing. People get very dramatic when they're hungry. So I really enjoyed that. So this novella, I should say, had some really strong points, but I think the strongest point actually was, and I spoke about this briefly in my episode To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. I mentioned how I'm not a particular fan of modernism, but in this particular case, there's one scene, the dinner party scene, and I thought modernism worked really strongly because you get the opportunity to sort of see this dinner party scene quite holistically over the top, and then because of modernism, you get to dip in and out of various characters and sort of get how they're presented, but then also the internal side of how they're presenting themselves. And that's exactly what this book does, because you're in the mindset of these 5 characters across these chapters throughout the story, is you get all these wonderful insights, and it's this wonderful story where everyone's kind of like acknowledging the fact that it's a really holy day, a really religious day. But once you're inside the minds, no one's really in that mindset, and everyone's just looking at people going, oh God, look at that person. She's exclaiming out loud. She's, going, breathing like that. She must be really sort of letting go of some trauma for the year, or really envisioning some story, some vision of herself for the following year. That's the coming year, I should say. And I think what I loved is then the story would then dip into her mind, and you're in her mind, and she's going, and really she's just starving. She's hungry, she's thirsty, she's tired. In the case of Rachel, she's worried that she hasn't made enough cakes for everyone. And so you get this really wonderful view where everyone's sort of scared and looking at everyone else going, God, look at them. They're all so incredibly devout and religious, and I'm not doing the best job I can. I'm not the best Jew I can be. I haven't worn the best clothes here today. I'm tired, I'm stressed, I'm complaining in my mind. I should be kinder to myself. I should be forgiving myself. I should be forgiving the people around me, forgiving the year I've led, and sort of trying to plan for the future. But really, I'm just standing here starving, hungry, thirsty. And it's all these kind of like internal monologues and stresses that really define and carry this story. When, they're looking at everyone else going, this, look at them all. They're all so religious. And everyone is then looking at them going, oh my God, look at him. He's so religious. He's really into this session of Yom Kippur. And it's this wonderful, like, are they all just fooling themselves? Is anyone actually sort of thinking about themselves in these moments? It's a classic case of, you're all so busy just wondering about what everyone thinks of you that you're not actually wondering what you think of yourself. And so you get these 5 characters, and they're all incredibly different. Like I said, Rachel's the baker. Ezra is this old artist who thinks he's a failure because he's never quite made it beyond selling sort of artworks. He's never sort of hit the big time. And there's some, I think, really nice social commentary there about what it takes to be a famous artist these days, because he's sort of reflecting upon a younger artist who's very in tune with the social game, the social media game, I should say, needing to be present and posting every day and having an opinion on everything and sort of, just posting everything. And he's kind of like, well, I'm just here to do my art. And he sort of, all 5 characters go through this really nice transitional phase of thinking quite lowly of themselves, or thinking that they've screwed up in some way. And then by the end of the story, they've all kind of gone full circle and realized that they actually kind of like their lives. And as the story progressed and they're sort of criticizing themselves for not being more in tune with this religious ceremony, through that reflective process, they actually sort of get more in tune with the religious ceremony and actually start thinking about themselves and what that means and what they've achieved and what they're doing and what they hope to do. And sort of, really nicely realizing that their lives aren't as bad as they think they are. And I've sort of spoken a lot about the comedy of the book and the comedic relief throughout the story, but that's not to say that these aren't incredibly poignant and serious stories as well, because there is one character, Ira, had to remind myself there, that he's having suicidal thoughts, and he thinks his life has sort of come to this end and he wants to kill himself, and he's just sort of at this religious ceremony he doesn't even quite know why he's there. He's just kind of like, I'm fulfilling one last sort of thing, and then after this I'm going to go kill myself. And it's really kind of interesting because there's a moment in the book, and it's sort of 2/3 of the way through, where something happens with the priest. And I won't tell you what, because I don't want to spoil it, but something happens with the priest where these 5 characters that you have been following up until this point have to suddenly react sort of quite instinctually to this moment that has happened. And they kind of then, in that moment, forget all their worries. They forget everything that they've been stressing about. They even forget the fact that they're tired, they're stressed, they're thirsty, they've been fasting all day, that they even forget that they're at a sort of religious ceremony for a brief moment, because they've got to sort of react really quickly to this thing that has happened. And it kind of almost acts as that momentary like reset button for all of them, because then after that it puts a lot of things in perspective for them, and it's this really nice moment where they come together as strangers, but by the end of it, they're not strangers. They're sort of bound by this event that has happened to them, collective event that has happened to them in a way beyond everyone else in the hall celebrating Yom Kippur as well. So yeah, I really enjoyed this story. It's brief. I think both stories are only about 110 pages, so you can smash through it pretty quickly. But I was really surprised with, the really nice comedy mixed with quite heavy discussions about sort of interpersonal or personal relationships to not just the world, but yourself as well. And it came to, I think, a really, really poignant end. And I would absolutely recommend it to anyone. So that was Yom Kippur in a Gym. So let's turn now to the second novella in this duo of novellas, In Sickness and in Health. Something, I said at the start of the episode, something I didn't really consider was how similar the books would be or how different they were. And after reading Yom Kippur in a Gym, I was curious to see whether this second book was going to be just as sort of humorous. I sort of read the title, In Sickness and in Health, and thought maybe there's a little subtle joke there like there is in Yom Kippur in a Gym, and couldn't sort of detect anything. And then I opened up and read the opening paragraph, and I knew straight away that this was not going to be a funny story at all. And I was going to read to you the first paragraph just to sort of give you a sense of how different the tone is in this. I read that little piece from Yom Kippur about the being hungry, and I thought I'd just quickly read this, and so you can get a sense of how serious and how different this second story is. So here we go. Sickness is a foreign country. You are lost there. You don't know the language, no matter how many times you've visited before. Nothing is familiar. You are alone, but a different kind of alone than usual, because when you are sick, you don't have yourself. Your own body has turned against you. It is your enemy now, and no one can fight and try to destroy their own body, so you are defenseless. Sickness is an alternate reality, its own existential state. In it you are lost. Lost not only like a mapless, hapless tourist, but in the sense of someone cursed, doomed and consigned to hell. There is no hope or salvation for you. You live when you are ill in an underworld that healthy people don't even know the existence of. So there is no one, not even the most loving Orpheus, who can save you. Not much humour in that opening paragraph, is there? Although I do love the little historical reference, the little mythological reference in there, and that kind of really sets the tone for the rest of the story. It's about this, I was about to say about a girl, it's about a young woman, I believe she was in her mid-40s, and once a week, or roughly once a week every month, she is struck down with this really odd sickness in that it's completely debilitating. She really has no energy to do anything but other than lie in bed. And she, it seems like a bit of a fever. She seems to be sweating a lot. She's got no energy. She's incredibly lethargic. But no matter how many times she goes to the doctors, they don't seem to be able to detect what's wrong with her. And there's kind of like this, I wouldn't say a mystery, because I truly did believe that she was sick, but she's kind of unsure whether she's just making herself sick once a month. And it's this really sort of devastating story, because you see how debilitating that would be to be sick for 1 week every month, and not just sick that like, it's a slight cough or cold and you could sort of manage your way through things, but it's like a completely debilitating sickness that really forces her. She's bedridden for the entire week, and there's one particular scene, but because you follow her through one bout of sickness, I think it lasts about 5 days through this story, there's midway through, she thinks she's healthy and she's got a gut energy, and she gets up and she's really excited, and you're really excited for her, and she goes downstairs, she does a bit of cleaning, she does a bit of a dance, and it's kind of like this shackling of the chains that have been holding her to this bed, and this sickness that is shedding the skin of this sickness that's been ruining her life. And then I think it's 2 hours later, she's back in bed and she realizes it was kind of like a false spring or a false summer, and she's still just as sick, and it in fact makes her even sicker. And that's sort of actually what you think the story's going to be about. And then all of a sudden, mixing in with this in a different tense as well, which I really enjoyed. The second sort of narrative that's weaved in is told in the third person, is all about her childhood, but it sort of seems almost disassociated from the character. Her name was Lily. Let me double check that. It was Lily. And it's Lily as a child, and she's suffering from it's kind of funny because you know what she's suffering from, but there seems to be this hesitancy to tell that to Lily, and she's having seizures, and her dad describes them to her as just sort of, she's just lost for a few moments and she's off having dreams, these daytime dreams. And it seems almost, I mean, it's really just the role of the father in this story to protect her child, to protect his child, sorry. And he's trying to, do the best he can to protect her from this really sort of scary thing, which is she's passing out and having seizures, but he just describes it as dreams. And it's this really sort of tough childhood because it seems to come and go in sort of yearly bouts. So she'll be really sick for a year and has to go on medication, and she has to leave the school she's at because she doesn't quite fit in because she's having seizures. She doesn't really know she's having seizures. So she has to go to this special school, and then she gets better for a year, and then she gets worse for a year. And it's kind of like this really fractured childhood that she doesn't really talk about. Lily doesn't really talk about now that she's an adult, that she's sort of mid-40s, and she kind of tries to ignore it. And I think that was sort of one of the brilliant things about this story, was that it was told in a different tense. It was told in the third person. So you really do feel disassociated from it, and you sense that Lily is trying to be completely disassociated from it. And it's kind of this, I don't know, really poignant but sad story of this girl that struggled all through her childhood, and she sort of grows out of these seizures, and then she starts getting sick again for 1 week a month. And it's a really difficult thing because she tries to disassociate her childhood. She tries not to think about and tries not to understand whether there's an influencing factor. She doesn't necessarily tell doctors about this childhood of sickness that has defined her and that has ailed her and defined her. And I mean, the whole thing is kind of like a big medical mystery, and it doesn't really, I don't think this is a spoiler, but it doesn't come to a solid end in terms of they magically find the magical pill. There's the silver bullet of health that comes along and saves her. But I think it does come to this really, really, another really beautiful ending. I mean, Yom Kippur and a Gym came to a really beautiful ending as well. But I think this comes to a really beautiful ending of acceptance. And it's all about sort of accepting who you are and who you were as well, which I think is a big part of this story. It's understanding that no matter how much you disassociate your childhood from your modern self, your current self, it still did lay foundations that have built you to where you are today. And I think that's sort of what this story's alluding to and builds to in the end. And it's just this wonderfully heartbreaking, shattering story that I think is really, I mean, I read you the quote, it's really wonderfully told through Nora Gold's prose. There is still glimmers of her humor in this. I think in Lily's sort of defense of herself, she does be quite harsh on herself, which comes out in humorous bursts, which are relatively funny, of course, because you know she's actually really sick and struggling. But no, really, really beautiful story in sickness and in health. Loved the fact that it was 2 novellas in one, Yom Kippur and a Gym, sickness and in health, the old flipper book. I've just knocked the microphone. The old flip book. I absolutely love it. I wish we'd see it more. I guess I got to give a rating, don't I? Do I rate them together as one, or do I rate them individually? I'm going to say both are 4.2s, actually. They were both fantastic. They're both worthy of a read. And the fact that it's 2 for 1, I mean, why wouldn't you? So yeah, Yom Kippur and a Gym, upside down, right way up, in sickness and in health. Okay, so what was I reading this week? Pick up my book. Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. Yeah, book 4 of the series. This is it's probably my second favorite book from memory, and it's probably my second favorite film, so really looking forward to it. I say I'm really looking forward to it. I'm already halfway through, and I am absolutely loving it. It's sort of the first really long version of the stories we get. Prior to this, Prisoner of Azkaban, I think, was 330 pages, whereas now we're sitting, doubling that. We're at 620 pages. Math was a little off there, but we'll ignore that. But yeah, absolutely loving it. I think the addition of sort of the widening of the magical world in terms of different schools. We've got the Durmstrang boys. We've got the Beauxbatons Academy there, although I'd forgotten this. Beauxbatons is actually co-ed, whereas in the films they are not, so I'd completely forgotten that. Doesn't play a major role in the story narrative so far. Yeah, absolutely loving it. It's so much fun. Also, the Quidditch World Cup has been great so far. Thoroughly. I mean, I'm sort of running out of ways to say that I'm really having fun reading the Harry Potter books again, but I am. So stay tuned for that. Thanks everyone for listening. If you have listened this far, please consider hitting 5 stars, like and subscribe. I would really appreciate it. No pressure, of course, though. Just enjoy the show. So yeah, I think it's time to end this episode. And today, to take us away, I think I want to read the opening testimonial from Stephen Donaldson's The Ill-Earth War because I thought it was quite nice. So here we go. That beauty and truth should pass utterly.